Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good evening. This is the November 8, 2013 Genesis Black Science Fiction Society show. And this evening, those of you all who are avid listeners will find this a refreshing change. This evening we have as our guest the usual host, William Hayashi. William, how you doing?
I am well.
Right. Well, all of us who are, again, the avid listeners of the show realize that this particular interview has been a long time coming because we had promised back, I guess, last year when we did the original interview with William that we would come back and do a second interview when the follow-up, the prequel to his novel Discovery, was launched. And, in fact, that novel was launched in October. So now we have the opportunity to talk with William about the launch of Conception, which is the prequel, and to kind of do a little bit of comparisons, juxtapositions between the two different books. And I just want to know, are you ready?
I'm actually ready. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and actually doing Conception took a long time. I mean, thinking about putting the plot together took about maybe about 10 years, because I wrote Discovery back in 2001 and messed around trying to get a publisher, and then found out that publishers don't talk to authors, so I had to find an agent. And I did find an agent, I guess, in the mid-2000s, or, like 2004, 2005. But having a first novel by an unknown name that was, at the time, 750 pages long, that just wasn't working. So I did that, and then trying to figure out how to do the plot for the second book took a long time, because it covers 40 years worth of time, and I didn't want to do something cheesy like, at the beginning of chapter 14, have it start out, and then 21 years later. So I had to figure out a reasonable plot device that would move the story along without having to go through really bad writing gyrations. So here we are today.
All right. Now, some of us have already read Discovery. Those of us who have read Discovery know that the last chapter, the epilogue in Discovery, was the opening sequence for Conception, which, having read them both, I know that there is completely, to my mind, different head that you're in when you wrote each one of them. And I can kind of give my idea of what I see that's different. I'd like to discuss it a little bit more. When I read Discovery, Discovery was truly, a novelization. It was, it was a novel. When I read Conception, I really did feel that it was more of a novelization of screenplay. So I want to get your ideas about between the time that you wrote Discovery, and then Conception. During that period, you had entered into screenwriting, correct?
That is true. Yeah, in 2009, I wrote my first screenplay.
Right.
People who have read Discovery have said, that it was written in a very, very visual style, in that as they read it, they could kind of see a little movie playing in their head, or they could conceptualize how Discovery could be made into a movie very, very easily. That wasn't deliberate on my part. That was serendipity, I guess. But I did like writing in a visual style because it actually reads faster. So when you have a 500-page book or a 750-page book, you do want people to kind of read it quickly, otherwise they lose interest. Or, I don't know how many times I tried to read War and Peace, but it was just too long, too hard. And I knew that I had a big story. And originally, the Dark Side trilogy was really going to be only one book. it was going to be just one novel with a great ending. I won't give it away. And then I realized that no, you can't do that because there's too much that's left out. There are too many things that people are going to want to know. And so I thought of, a reasonable way to break up the whole arc of the Dark Side universe, or at least this portion of the Dark Side universe, into three books. Now, to be very honest with everybody, the whole Dark Side universe is going to consist of 7 novels. So there'll be 2 trilogies, and then there's going to be a 7th novel that winds up the whole story, which brings everything to not a close. Well, yeah, I guess to a close for the story. But I wanted each book to be able to stand alone, and I want every single one of the installments, if somebody reads them out of order or somebody happens to pick up like the 2nd volume or the 3rd volume first, they can go and still read, earlier volumes in the trilogy without, first of all, they won't need it to understand what's going on, and second of all, they won't be sitting there going, oh, great, I just bought this book, and now, I need to know all this other stuff before I can read it. So I was very careful not to do that as well. I mean, the difference in where my head was from a writing perspective between the 2 books is like night and day. They're 2 different stories, 2 different types of stories. The plot structure is different. You as a reader probably have better insight into that than I do because I know what I had to do to get it written, but I think you probably would be able to explain better whether I executed it well or pulled it off right than I would be able to tell.
Now, one of the things that I found to be an issue in conception was that it was very heavy with dialogue. I mean, just really good interactive dialogue between the individuals. I mean, you build these characters, and with respect to the character development and discovery, comparing it with the character development that you went through with conception, how would you say it changed between the first book and the second book?
Well, the first book, somebody else wrote a review and said that the first book was like a cross between Michael Crichton and Robert Ludlum. And as flattering as that is, that's the kind of plot structure that I use. I read a lot. I've read, probably a few thousand books easily. I started reading science fiction before I was a teen. Excuse me. And that first book, I had one thing going for me. I had never done it before. I'd never written a book before, and certainly wasn't sure I was going to finish it when I started it. And then, of course, that's also the same handicap because I had never written a book before, and there are certain things you should probably know how to do or pay attention to, and I didn't know what they were. So in some ways, I think discovery, obviously since a third of it was edited and cut out before it went to print, I had some things in there. And if I were to be very honest, which I don't generally like to do, I would tell people that I had just gotten divorced and probably put a lot of stuff in there that had no business being in there because, you get a divorce, you have some issues, and I had some issues. But to the point that you're making, I actually freaked out when I was uploading all of the files for doing the conversion and uploading the files for conception because something that you just pointed out, I hadn't noticed. I hadn't noticed how heavy in dialogue it was, and I started thinking about that and had a little minor freak out about it, thinking, "Oh my God, I just wrote a book with a bunch of people talking," and I had some worries about that. But the thing is in conception we meet the people. For those who haven't read Discovery, excuse me for saying so, but Discovery tells a story of what happens in America when the country finds out that black folks have been living on the backside of the moon in secret. They've been there since before Neil Armstrong got there. okay, in the first book you learn that these people exist in Discovery, but you don't learn very much about them. The entire Dark Side universe revolves around, these people. Why? First of all, why did they go to the moon? Second of all, how did they accomplish it? And third of all, what was their motivation? So why would they go there? And obviously I hit the nail on the head with that because I have a review on Amazon, a 1-star review on Amazon from a white guy who said that Discovery to him was like a Saturday Night Live skit. And he said he couldn't get behind the premise because he just couldn't imagine in his world why black folks would be so disenchanted with the United States of America that they would immigrate to the moon. Why would they leave? And that's the essence of what the Dark Side universe is about. These are not people who want to go along to get along. These are not people who are going to wait for, the kumbaya moment when the dominant culture in America decides, non-whites are just as entitled to the same things that that wealthy whites might be, or something like that. So all of a sudden we've got these people, these black folks in the early 1960s. They figure out how to get to the moon, and they say, yeah, let's get there because nobody else is there. No white folks are there until Neil Armstrong comes by. I was going to have some fun with that, but I decided, no, let's keep that kind of historically accurate because I didn't want to pull anybody out of the story in a suspension of disbelief. So that's the reason why the two books are entirely different. The first book is more of a mystery. It's a drama. It's a mystery. We've got a disappearance of people off the street that all of a sudden the FBI realizes is going on. We have some sort of aircraft that gets shot down in Iraq. We have all of these disparate parts of the plot. There's 4 main subplots, and they all come together when the U.S. discovers that there's somebody living on the moon. And then, oh my God, 2 seconds later they find out, and they're black. So that's essentially why the two books are so different, because in the second book, in Conception, I'm introducing the people who actually pulled this off, and I feel that it's beholden upon me to explain, in realistic terms, in terms that people can believe in, why would black folks do this? Why would they decide, let's go to the moon, instead of Liberia or, the Fortress of Solitude or some Aleutian island?
Now, when I read Conception, one of the things that came across to me, again, is how well developed the characters were. And I want to know, when you're writing these characters, are you channeling anyone you know, or is it, just, coming just out of the recesses of your imagination?
Some of these people they're like composites of people I know. I can't really invent people out of whole cloth. They're a combination of what role they play, and then I try to find some characteristics that I might have seen in other people. One of the things that really pissed me off at the very beginning of that actually prompted me to write Discovery was the fact that people like me, and I don't mean biracial, but people, middle-class black folks, upper middle-class black folks who go and do a job and, aren't rappers, they aren't Oprah, they aren't drug dealers, they aren't athletes, they aren't Michael Jordan. Those black folks don't exist. They just don't exist in the American lexicon, because, and if they did exist and they were something that was every day, kind of like an everyday occurrence, we wouldn't have had people losing their mind over Bill Cosby having a doctor marry a lawyer. Well, I've said this before. A black doctor marrying a black lawyer, having kids who have essentially white problems. Everybody had a problem with that because, of course, those kind of people don't exist. Well, those are the people I grew up with. I grew up in the same neighborhood that Barack Obama settled in, Hyde Park. It's the University of Chicago neighborhood. A lot of bright people there, a lot of people from all over the world, all over the country, different cultures, and those are the people I grew up with. There wasn't a rapper in my – I got to go back because back then they didn't have rap. But you know what I'm saying? I think the coolest – celebrities that we had in my immediate neighborhood that we met or even interacted with. Muhammad Ali lived not too far from my house, and he would drive to see Dick Gregory, who lived, the activist, who lived across the street from our block, and Muhammad Ali would illegally park in our parking lot with his big red Cadillac convertible. So these are the kind of we saw these kinds of people, these notables, but they lived in our neighborhood, so it wasn't such a different thing. And the other thing was, me, my brother, my sister, we're biracial. There weren't a lot of biracial people back then. I was born in I'm 82, count on back. And so it wasn't a big deal. Hyde Park the Hyde Park neighborhood in Chicago, it wasn't that big a deal. And yet, nowadays, we have a half-black president of the United States, or we have this, or we have that. Oh, look at Tiger Woods. I don't even know what he calls himself, something Cablinasian or something. So, it was different growing up in that neighborhood. It was different growing up with those people. And those are the kind of people that I grew up with. Those are the kind of people I went to school with. And then all of a sudden, I leave for college, go to Wisconsin, and things are quite a bit different. So my characters are composites of real people. I mean, if you read either Conception or Discovery, and you look at the characters, you talk to the characters, you hang with the characters, these are real people. These are people you could meet out on the street.
I have a question. You're just speaking now about when you moved to Wisconsin to go to school. Did you feel isolated coming from the type of diverse community that you'd come from in Chicago? And how did you deal with that I guess shift in the type of community that you were living in?
It's kind of funny. In Green Bay in the early 70s, I got there in 73, I guess. The only black people who worked there worked for Procter & Gamble, or they were on the Green Bay Packers football team. And sadly but true, racial incidents in Green Bay, Wisconsin followed the same kind of I don't know if it's a behavioral curve or whatever, but however well the Packers were doing is how well race relations would go on in that town. And people are going to call, they're going to get upset, they're going to go, you're lying. But it's true. If the Green Bay Packers were doing great, it was fine. If the Green Bay Packers were not doing great, you could hear all kinds of things being hollered at you, shouted at you, because, of course, if somebody up there saw a black person way back then, obviously they had to be related to or on the team. So it was kind of a shock. And it was also a shock when I moved back to Chicago. I even spent a year in the Upper Peninsula. When I moved back to Chicago and I went shopping, it was around Christmas time, I was in one of these big-ass malls down here. And I went to the mall and I was doing my shopping, and I saw all these black people, and I didn't know who they were. Because living in Green Bay, you knew every single one. You knew each one. And I was a disc jockey at the time. I was on the radio and I did club work. So that was a fairly social kind of job to have. So, I knew people. People knew me. A little bit of celebrity there. Got away with a lot of things. Got to date a lot of people I had no business dating. But it is a shock when you move into that kind of environment. You go, for me, it was a shock. But I was young. I was in school. I was doing a lot of things. I was very active, so it wasn't something that I dwelled on. It's funny. Here in Chicago, we've got a news station, an all-news station, News Radio 78, And a friend of mine works there. His name is Eric Brown, and he went to St. Norbert's College, which is kind of in a suburb of Green Bay. And I went to the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay, and they had racial problems over at St. Norbert's, and we all tried to help out. We hung out over in their living spaces at night because signs were being put up with the N-word and other things. And it's just that's just the way it is. Things are much, much worse up there now. I have friends who still live there, and it's all because you have some very small-minded conservative people who are upset that this black guy is president of the United States. And I don't get it, and I don't care anymore. I used to get very upset, and I used to try to change people's minds. But you know what? I don't care. I really don't care. I mean, if they're going to be miserable about that, then God love them. I mean, I am just happy that they're going to have to live with that poopy taste in their mouth because Obama's president until, January 21st, 2017. I mean, it's just fine.
But for yourself, when you were there, and I know you're saying that, you kind of had the benefit of, being, having a little celebrity, DJ, and things, things like that. But did you feel the culture shock, or was it something that you kind of, because of your celebrity, that you had, that it just didn't hit you that much?
Fortunately, even there at the school on campus, there were a lot of people who were obviously from other places. UWGB was one of the first environmental campuses in America, so it drew a pretty broad spectrum of people from all over. So on campus, it was not that big a deal. In town, it's hard to tell. At this late date, I could probably tell you, there were a bunch of things that happened, but I think the thing that bothered me the most was insular people who had no intention of changing their mind, no matter what the circumstance, no matter what kind of evidence that you could tell them, no matter what factual information you could give them. And eventually you just say, screw it, go on with your life. And I went on with my life. I had a decent life up there, and well, I'll tell you this. I was the first person with a Japanese last name to be the president of a Wisconsin campus black student union. So that'll give you some idea of some of the weirdness up there. But I don't know what to tell you at this point. I mean, we're almost a generation removed from my being there. I left in 1980. And that was quite some time. But I will tell you this. It's funny because at that time, there was somebody who was teaching some science fiction writing classes. And I did stuff for class, but that, I did the minimum to get by and never, ever, ever wrote anything after that. I wrote some stuff for the class. And it wasn't writing. I take it all back. It was reading. We were reading science fiction, which was easy for me because I had a huge library. I even took a bunch of my library up to school with me because I like to reread my books. But I didn't write anything, never had written anything in the vein of discovery or conception until 2001. So, that's a long time, to go and not do something, And even when I started writing discovery, I wasn't sure I was going to finish it. I had started another book that I thought was going to be great. It was going to sell on the title alone, and then I lost interest in it. So.
What is it then that you think made you stick with discovery? It took you a while to write it. It's a long book.
I'll tell you exactly what happened. It's funny because I have had stories. I've been creative. I've had stories in my head, and it was 2001, and I was board chair of a social service agency, and we were being reaccredited. So what they do is they make you fill out like 6-8 feet worth of three-ring binders where you have to talk about all your programs, this, that, and the other thing. And as board chair, obviously I was invested in getting this done, and it was a crappy day. I think I put this in either the foreword or the introduction of Discovery. It was a crappy day here in Chicago. We had that snow that was coming down and immediately turned to slush. And I was thinking, no matter how many stories that you have in your head, they don't exist unless you put them down on paper. And I thought, well, you could try to write a book. And I thought, okay, how am I going to do that? And then I said to myself, well, you could just start writing. I said, yeah, but what about a plot or something like that? I said, well, okay. And it's funny because I started out as a computer programmer in 1970. 1970, I had my first job. I was working for IBM. I wasn't even out of high school. And so what I did was I pulled out a technical drawing package. For those of you who know these things, it was Visio, which is a fairly sophisticated drawing package. And I drew a flow chart, which I actually posted up at BSFS. I drew a flow chart of what I thought a cool story would be. And the impetus for the story, the whole thing, the genesis, if I could borrow that word, of the entire story was I came up with an ending. I came up with the words that end the story of Discovery. And so when you read that you'll know that that's exactly where it happened. And so I came up with that, and then after I did this drawing, I did this flow chart, I put it away, and then I started typing, in between doing the corrections for the reaccreditation stuff. And that was February, I don't know, I think it was like early February of 2001. So, I typed. It kept going through, for the summer, kept going. My friends quit answering their phone when they would see me on caller ID because I go, hey, can you listen to this? Not right now. Like, I have things to do. And some people did help me. And I just kept going and going and going. And then in November of 2001, I was sitting, it was a Friday, and the only reason why I know it was Friday was because I went to play tennis. It was a Friday, I'm typing, and all of a sudden, I typed the last words in the book, in the manuscript. And they were the words that I started out with in February. And I kind of sat there because I went like, wow, you just wrote a book. And I was stunned. I was actually in shock because when I stood up, I was kind of dizzy. I was lightheaded. And I'm like, what is this all about? And I had written a book, and it kind of freaked me out. And I didn't do anything for a couple of days after that because I was kind of shocked. And then I think it was about a week or two later that I pulled out that I found that flow chart and went and looked at the flow chart, and there was really only a couple minor, tiny little differences between what I had thought of in February and what I ended up writing and concluded in November. So that's what started it. What started it was kind of like a dare. I dared myself. Well, you got this idea. You're going to make a book. What are you going to do? And I went and I typed it. And I didn't know what I was doing. And as I look back, I can tell I didn't know what I was doing because, first of all, I've got 30, 40 characters in there, and that's an awful lot of people to have in a story. And then the second thing was, to have kept going, and done 330,000 words for a book, my first book, which would have come to 750 pages. Well, I'll be honest with you, nobody's ever going to publish that from a first-time author. So, that's what started. That's the whole thing. It was kind of like a dare. It's like, okay, you got a story, you got a great ending, now what are you going to do? So that's how it all started.
So what made you, and you said early on that this was supposed to have been a one-shot. You're going to do one book. When was it during the process of writing Discovery or thereafter that you realized that you were going to take it further?
I think it was about halfway through, because the ending of the book was, it was kind of it's an ironic, shocky kind of ending. But then I realized, oh, you're doing all of this and nobody's going to ever know about, specifically about these people on the moon. And that was when I said, oh, you're going to have to do another book. And I tell this joke about the fact that one of the reasons why I didn't get a publisher is because, on the cover of the book, I put Volume 1 of the Dark Side Trilogy, so everybody's going to wait to see what the rest of them are like before they commit to it. But I would say it was about halfway through when I realized you've got more story than one book can cover, unless you're going to do, a 2,000-page book. That's just not, that wasn't going to work. I mean, I can't imagine how that would have turned out, trying to write something that big. So about halfway through, I decided, well, you could do 2 volumes, but then I realized that with the second volume, if I talk about the people who got to the moon, what would happen in America if that happened? What would happen if black folks had stuff that white folks didn't have? Well, I was pretty sure white folks would try to come and get it. Beg, borrow, or steal it. So the third volume of the trilogy, you've got Discovery, you've got Conception. The third volume is called Confrontation. And Confrontation is just what it is. I mean, all of these titles are descriptive of exactly what goes on in the book. And in Confrontation, there's going to be there's going to be a confrontation. There's going to be a reckoning. There's going to be some stuff happening. And I'm actually, right now as I'm sitting here, I've got about half of chapter 11 done for Confrontation.
All right. Now, right now, as you're working on Confrontation, you've completed Conception, Discovery. Which one of the books was easiest to write? Or are you finding Confrontation to be easier to write than Discovery or Conception?
Well, I had, like I said, I had the trouble with Confrontation, figuring out a good plot device to move 4 years worth of time through the book, and to do it in a way that wasn't, I guess I'll call it cheesy. That wasn't cheesy, like I said, having the and then 10 years later. So I think of the 3, Confrontation was the hardest one to do, because it took about almost a decade for it to kind of chew over in the back of my head, before my forebrain, my hindbrain was working on it all along, but my forebrain, it took a long time working through that to try to figure out, how is this going to work? How is this plot going to work? How are you going to be able to tell this story in a way that is palatable to readers and doesn't bore them? Well, let me ask you this. When you were reading Conception, did you get bored at any point and go, could you please move the story along, or did it move along okay? That's the thing that I'm worried about. When people read it, I worry about the readability of a book, because ultimately that's what you're going to be judged on.
From my personal opinion, having read both books, I found that Conception read faster than Discovery.
Oh, okay. And that's funny, because Conception is about 100 pages longer than Discovery. That shocked me, too. That, and when I was looking at it, I'm going, oh, there's a lot of dialogue in here. Ooh, that's a lot of Well, I actually called some people. You were one of them, and I said, I think I'm freaking out here, because I don't think I wrote a good book. And that was the same thing that happened with Discovery. I didn't think that I had written a good book until about 8 months after it was on sale and some of the reviews started coming in. Your friends can tell you a lot of things. Your friends can have, can say this is a great book, things like that. But if you have decent friends, they're not going to tell you if you've done something terrible. And knowing, the psychology of friendship, well, okay, I got some friends, but I wouldn't let them read it if they were going to treat me like that. but I wasn't sure that I had written a good book. And, I probably have as much anxiety about whether or not my product is good as anybody else, if not more so. So I do worry about that. I mean, readability is the big thing, and the two things I think about when I write, either a screenplay or a book, is I want to have a great ending, because, of course, that's what you close the book and think about, or you walk out of the theater thinking about. And so that's really important, and I want to make sure that that is good. And I want to make sure that the story holds people's interest, and not in a bad way. Not in a way like, oh, my God, I can't believe he did that. Can the next page be any worse? That I don't want any of that either.
Well, for those of you all who are just joining us now, this is the November 8th, 2013 edition of the Genesis Black Science Fiction Society radio show. We are having a lovely conversation with the science fiction author, William Hayashi, regarding his current book, the prequel to his original book, Discovery, and is entitled Conception. Right now, I guess it's one of the issues I want to kind of circle back to. We were talking a little bit about flowchart that you had done when you originally wrote Discovery. And I just wanted to kind of, I've noticed a lot of people who are, science fiction writers, and especially of the BSFS or Black science fiction writers, are also technical people. They are in technical fields. Do you find that your position as an IT professional has had an impact on the way that you write, or how it is that you prepare to write?
Yeah, I think well, no, it does. It has a huge effect, and I'll tell you why. Having read so much, through the years, one of the things that really bothers me is when I'm reading a story, I'm getting into it, or I'm watching a movie, and then all of a sudden something happens that completely pulls me out of the story because it's just ridiculous. I'll give you an example. In Prometheus, you've got this whiny little engineer guy who's scared of everything. And, he's complaining about this, that, and the other thing. And then, all of a sudden, he's the one who wants to play with the little white snake, the white alien snake, and wants to poke it with a stick, just stupid things like that. So being very detail-oriented, and you have to be as a programmer, you have to be detail-oriented, because if you don't do what you're supposed to do, it just doesn't work. I think that it helped. I think it helped a lot. It helped a lot because I had that kind of grounding, that basis of grounding in creating the world and also the people. I mean, I did a ton of research. Some people have complained that there's too much science in there, there's too much technical stuff in there, and I tell people just skip over it, just look at the dialogue if that works better. But everything in there is authentic, and I'll tell you how authentic it is. I started writing this in February. A friend of mine sent me a link to a white paper by some scientists, astrophysics physicists in Ireland, who had decided that they were going to try to measure gravity waves, and they used the exact same principle that I came up with on my own in Discovery. And I guess it was last week or the week before, there was an announcement of these 3 satellites that they're going to send into fairly close orbit around the sun. And these satellites are supposed to try to finally measure gravity waves that come off the sun, and they used the exact same principle that I had that I put together in my head for Discovery. So that was like validation of at least the way that I conveyed my science and the things that I thought were important. So I mean, that was pretty cool for me. So it's very important for me to get the science accurate, There's some computer imagery stuff in there. I did some of that in 1980. So I knew about that. I researched Soviet military hardware, and finally there's a mission that involves using one of the space shuttles, and I had an idea for that shuttle, and I called NASA, and they put me in touch with the head librarian, and I asked her, and I can't remember her name. I'll have to look that up. I had an idea, and I described it to her, and she said, wait, hang on a minute. And she was taking notes, and she said, could I have your phone number? And I gave her my phone number, and she said, I'm going to go check with one of the engineers. And I'm thinking, oh, that's pretty cool. And she went and checked with one of the engineers, and she called me back like 2 days later. I thought maybe she had blown me off. She called me back, and she said, oh, they were very excited because what you wrote was feasible. What your idea is feasible. So it is important to me to get the science right. And plus, I read Clancy. I read a lot of those kind of techno thrillers. And, those guys are so proud of, oh, I know all these weapons. I know this. I know that. And they're very anal about getting it right. And I understand why, because when somebody reads something and go, oh man, that's ridiculous. You can't do that with a roller skate. And they get upset, they write about it, they it takes them out of the story. So it was very important for me to get all that right. And I think that the basis for that, or at least the stick-to-itiveness about that, is because, as a programmer, you can't get a character wrong. You can't get a plus or a minus sign wrong. Otherwise, the program just doesn't work. So I think that stood me well in writing Discovery. Well, it's going to stand me well in writing this whole 7-book series.
Now, when we previously spoke with you a while back, and it was kind of mentioned this evening, that back when you were a very young man, you played football, and
yes,
and also when you were young, and even to this day, you play tennis. Now, one of these, a solo sport that is very one-on-one competitive. The other thing is a team sport. In writing, and I know writing is very solitary, but do you find value in your sports background? Do you use any of that with regard to how you've developed your characters, the camaraderie of your characters, the team, and I guess the solo aspect of individuals within your story who are required to get individual projects done? So, do you draw on any of that in your writing?
Yeah, I do. I guess I'll give you a quick example in Discovery. One of the CIA guys plays tennis. Okay, I play tennis. It is an individual sport. So I think the parts that I draw from, my sports background, my competitive background, are how people drive themselves to succeed. And I think it's also a good way of creating a well-rounded character. One of the things that I like to do is, and I've been accused of my books starting out too slow. A very good friend of mine, she's a very good writer. She said, and she actually reviewed it. She said, other than a slow beginning, the book is great. But one of the things that I deliberately do is I want to start off so that when people start getting into the characters, after about 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th chapter, they know these people. So when the people start doing things, when the characters start performing, when they start doing what they're doing, not only do I want there to be a consistency for the character, like, oh, yes, that sounds like that's what they would do, but I want to make sure that there's a genuine, there's that genuine feel, and I want them to be three-dimensional. I want these characters to be alive for people because Their investment in the story, their psychological investment in the story is a lot greater. And that's pretty important for reading satisfaction. There's a science to writing as much as there is to anything else. There's a science to creating your characters, and a lot of people don't know that, and they don't pay attention to that. But there's a way of doing that so that when people get with your characters and when people start getting to know them, they have an attachment. And one of the things that I've caught holy hell from a lot of people because of something that happened near the end of Discovery. And they said, how could you do that to him or her or whatever? Because they have an investment in those characters. And that's another thing. The characters in Discovery, only a couple of them make an appearance in Conception, because Conception, basically, the two books are constructed like this. Discovery tells a story of America finding out that black folks are on the moon. Conception tells the 40-year story of the people who they found on the moon, and the first two books end essentially with the same scene. They end with the same circumstance, and in the first book you see everything from the perspective of the people down here who discovered them. And in the second book, you see the same incidents, the same events from the perspective of our lunar inhabitants. So, I want people to get to know these characters, and that will lead them to the third book, where you see all of them, or many of them, coming together in this confrontation. And that's, I think that's just good writing, good character construction, and just a good habit to get into, because people didn't buy all those damn Harry Potter books just because they like googly preteen white boys who wear glasses. No, they got into those characters, and they got into those stories, and they were invested in them.
Right.
Which doesn't explain why people like 50 Shades of Grey. That was crap, but that's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, and I know I was one of the people that did have an opportunity to read Conception, and I don't know if you remember, at one point that I did call you, and I was livid about what had happened to one of the characters. I mean,
yeah, I know, and see, that's the thing. Obviously, I did something right if you're that invested in the character and you know these people the way you know them, and you go either, how could you do that, or, oh, no, they wouldn't do that, or whatever your issue is, then I think as a writer I've done a pretty good job in creating some believable people, and that was very important to me.
Yeah. And the group dynamic. And I think, I don't want to give away anything with regard to the plot, but, again, this second book, Conception, is done against the backdrop of the space program and the civil rights movement. So, there's a lot going on in the story about how these people deal with these issues. They are, at the cusp of the space program itself. Actually, they are riding the crest long before anybody even knows that there's a wave. And, they have, in addition to that, dealing with issues of race, sex, all these things that were the country was embroiled in during that period. And, how much of those things, I know, of course, you're doing research, that else, but how much of that came from your own background of being within, your academic community or whatever, or even working community, the way that people were treated, the glass ceilings, things like that, and how they made their way into the book.
Well, in Discovery, the people in Discovery are basically present-day Americans for the most part, and there are some foreigners. they are present-day Americans, and I wrote them as authentically about, in the manner of how things are, in present-day America, how they are racially, how they are, I guess even the gender issue, or even the sexual issue, how things are authentically in America, because I wanted people. Okay, I'll give you an example. When I have that elevator pitch for Discovery, and the elevator pitch goes like this: Discovery tells the tale of what happens in America when the country discovers a secret colony of African Americans who have been living on the moon since before Neil Armstrong gets there. And I will tell you that right now, 1 out of 4 people who I say that to ask me, and this is no BS, they ask me, is this a true story? Okay, so I have to examine that in that context, and I go, and I'm thinking about, well, if I say it like that, and it sounds like it could be real to them, then I want to get the sociology, I want to get the culture, I want to get all of that real as well. And one of the reasons why I wrote that book, I told you, because I wanted to have black folks in there that I grew up with. But the other thing that I wanted to have in there was I wanted to have it so real, I wanted to have it so accurate in terms of culture, psychology, sociology, all of that for America, that if tomorrow we discover black folks living on the backside of the moon and we find out they've been there since the 1960s, you can damn well bet your bottom dollar that this country will act exactly the way that I wrote it in Discovery. And that was also very important to me too, because getting the sociology and the psychology accurate, well, that was important. It's important for 2 reasons. One is, the authenticity, and then when people read it, they go, of course, as they're reading along. Oh, yeah, and they don't have to pull themselves out and going, oh, no, that wouldn't happen, And the other part was I toyed with the idea of writing a book that might be used academically. I thought, well, maybe if it's good and it discusses the sociology of in-group, out-group exclusion, it discusses matters of race, things like that, that this could possibly be used in an academic setting. Part of that was a little bit of ego on my part. As an undergraduate, I was asked to co-teach a class at the University of Wisconsin, and it was called Black and White Americans, How They View Themselves and Each Other. And the class was wild, because you start talking about these kinds of issues, racial issues, how people see each other, how, and it was a mixed class. We had Indians, Native American Indians, not Asian Indians. We had Native American Indians in there. We had black folks in there. We had white folks in there. And it was fairly spirited, because we let things go. We let people talk realistically about what's going on with them sociologically in terms of prejudice, race relations, and things like that. So, yes, I wanted it to be authentic. I drew from the way America is today. I drew from my expectations, realistic expectations of what could happen under these circumstances. All of that was very important. All of that was really important to me, because when people read it, I want them to think, the only thing that's not the only speculative part in this entire book is the fact that we don't have blacks on the moon. Everything else is business as usual.
Well, I know that in the first book, again, we, like you're saying, we deal with basically current day America. Current how and the lead character, the main character. If you want to put it that way. I guess it's difficult to say main character, because there's several kind of ensemble cast kind of characters. But we start out with Norma, and, she, has her own, quote-unquote, discovery that, is one of the first elements of this ultimate discovery. And, this is a person who's an academic, This is a person, who is, as the Italians say, ragazza in gamba. She's a girl on the go, moving along in her life, but still she's got some hold. And it appears that, all of the characters, everyone has, these positive characteristics, but everyone has, their feet of clay. There's this thing about them that is searching the hole that they're trying to fill. And I know, one of the first scenes that, you wrote for Confrontation, again, is dealing with someone who, came from the first book, from Discovery. He was not in Conception. But that person, again, we're trying to fill a hole. Is that going to be, a common theme? These characters who, in their lives, are trying to fill these holes.
Well, yeah, because I think that's the sociology of existence, the psychology of existence, even. Let's take all of us, the people at BSFS. We're all creatives in some way, artists, comic book creators, novelists, short story writers. I think that there, obviously there might be some larceny in there. There certainly is for me. I'd love to be discovered. I'd love to be wealthy off of my writing. But I will tell you, when you think back to what made me start writing Discovery, I had just gotten divorced. I had kids and a wife, and I had a full house, and then I was divorced, and I had a lot of time on my hands. So, and I'm thinking the first thing I thought, and I'll be honest with you, the first thing I thought when I thought, I'm going to be divorced was I said, man, now I have to get back in the dating pool. And, I hadn't been swimming for years. So, there was that. So writing kind of filled that. And writing is therapeutic for me because I have, you get that, what is that stereotype of the angry black man? In many ways, I'm that guy, and the reason why is I think obviously it's because I am biracial. My dad's he was Japanese. Well, no, he's still Japanese. He's just not around. But he and his family lost everything, during World War II because they got hustled out of the Bay Area in San Francisco and locked up in a concentration camp in Utah. Okay. My grandfather on my maternal grandfather on my mom's side of the family, he was a black cattleman, and got in Oklahoma, I guess it was. And the story is he got chased out of there because he was more successful than the white cattlemen, and they threatened to hang him, to lynch him. And I got anger about that. I got issues, and I'm getting older, and you have to pick your battles, but these issues haven't been addressed. Look at this country today. Look at how people are behaving. You got this AstroTurf Tea Party BS. You got all of these white Republicans who just cannot cotton to the fact that we got a black POTUS, President of the United States, and all of that permeates our culture. All of that affects us. You hear them talk about, in 2040 the Beaners are going to outnumber us and we're going to become a minority. White folks are saying that, and so writing is therapeutic, and writing about today was very important. I could have written a science fiction story, 30,000 years in the future, or I could have written, kind of in the style of Butler or Octavia Butler or Samuel Delany, and kind of couch today's culture, today's psychology, today's issues in a step removed universe. But what I wanted to do was just write about America the way it is, what we have to go through as a de facto circumstance, and not be accusatory, because there's no point in being accusatory, because why turn people off? Write a good story and let them get into it, but tell the truth. And that's what I wanted to do. I tried very hard not to point fingers or be angry. I don't think, you've read both books. Do you see any anger in there from the writer's perspective? I hope not.
Yeah, I see lots of anger, but no, but I like as you're saying, it is anger. It is expressed through the characters.
Yeah.
From perspective, I think especially in some certainly in service, but even more so in conception because for those who are going to pick up the books, going to read the book, discovery is a nice gateway drug. But when you're ready for the hard stuff, I think we're going to have to use perception because this is when we're going down the rabbit hole. When you hold on and you're just taking the trip, with this crew, and you are there, you are present in it, and I think, as a read goes, I love Discovery, I really loved it, and when I read Conception, and I told you, when I read Conception, you have outdone yourself with this.
Okay, and then I'll go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, go on.
Well, okay, and then the other thing, when I set out to write Discovery, I almost hate to say this. I'll say it. I wanted to write a big story. I wanted to write one of the biggest stories about race that had ever been written. Okay, you got Asimov, who has his Foundation series. You got Herbert, who has its Dune series. You have all these people who have these multi-volume series, and they're talking about politics. They're talking about sociology. They're talking about things. I wanted to write a big story in that same vein, which is one of the reasons why I've got synopses for 7 volumes. I've got the 2 trilogies. I'm going to start on the second trilogy, a year or so after I'm done with the Dark Side trilogy. And when I set out, I said to myself, I want to write a big story and a big story about race and a big story with black characters, and I want it to be bigger than anybody else's story. And I look at Delaney, I look at Butler, I look at detective stories, I look at black series. I look at Walter Mosley, lives here in town, seen him a dozen times, met him, talked to him. And I wanted to write a big story. And I think that was more ego-driven than anything else, but it was still grounded in wanting to tell a good story that discussed race in a way that was not accusatory and it wasn't angry. From my perspective, my personal perspective, living in America, I think that white culture and black culture are both self-destructive. Neither is going to last out, very much longer because they don't nurture a community. Okay, neither of them nurture a community. You've got the greed and where money seems to rule the day, in the common culture, the larger culture of America, and then. I've said this kind of jokingly, but it's absolutely true. You don't see, in black culture, you don't see black people, working together. You don't see them, giving people a hand up, things like that, because I believe, and I've seen enough evidence of it, that a lot of us believe that life is a zero-sum game. Okay, they see it that way, they treat it that way, they live it that way, and even in this creative environment that we have, where we're black creatives, I believe from the evidence that I've seen that a lot of people believe that if I get a nickel in my pocket, they believe it was taken out of their pocket, and that is something that's killing us. It's not survival oriented. It's not a good thing. It hasn't contributed to anything. And I think it goes back to when they made us row these boats over here, and they had the dichotomy. They set up the dichotomy of house Negroes versus field Negroes. And it's just not survival-oriented. We already know that American culture is not survival-oriented. We're going to cut off, $47 million in the food stamp program, and yet there's $6 billion in the farm bill to give to very, very wealthy people who are industrial farmers. I mean, what is that all about? So the thing that I'm pointing out in the dark side universe is if your culture is not sustainable, if your culture is not going to help people live, people survive, for people to have a better quality of life, what better way of escaping that but by leaving? And that's another thing. This dark side universe allows me to put together a community of people, a community of black people who live outside of the dominant culture and who escape, some of the deprivations that we visit upon ourselves. And that was an interesting thing to me, and it was also a fearful thing for me. And I'll tell you where the fear came in. The fear came in when I started writing this second book, because I thought, well, I wonder if black academics are going to read it and they're going to go, oh, this is just complete nonsense. None of this could happen. None of these things could happen. People don't behave that way. This is not us. And I was fearful of that. I was anxious about that. But then I decided, screw them. How do they know? How do they know? Another thing, I went to a lecture, and I'm not going to look up the guy's name, but this is a black Harvard educated scholar who teaches over at the University of Chicago. And he's standing around talking the kind of nonsense that, we're in a post-racial America in terms of black literature. That black literature is now American literature because we don't have the pushback of slavery, so that we can't delineate ourselves as different from other people. And I went to the lecture, and I said, and the first thing I said to him in front of a bunch of people was, well, if that's the case, then we only have two kinds of literature left in America. And he said, what are those? And I said, well, it's American literature and LGBTQ whatever literature. And he looked at me and says, well, perhaps you're right. I thought, I said, this is just BS, because his own imprint, the University of Chicago bookstore, still delineates American literature from black literature. So there's nonsense enough to go around. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to try to create a community where none of that nonsense exists, where we look past it. I was looking in the chat room here, and somebody said, well, what makes the society on the moon different? And I said that there's no greed. And they said, well, how is that? I said, well, there's no money. I mean, if anybody can sit there and imagine how would America run if there was no such thing as money and everybody just did what they were supposed to do for their job, and they didn't have to go and buy things, they just, whatever they needed, they could have. Probably can't work for the whole country, but it can work in a community of maybe a few thousand people. And that's the community that I've built on the moon. So if somebody wants to take issue with me about that, they're going to have a pretty strong argument for why it can't work. We've bartered for years. I mean, we've bartered for a long time until people came up with common currency. And even before that, when you had nomadic tribes and things like that, there was certainly a lot healthier community in terms of helping everybody in the community maintain a certain standard of living. Now we don't have that. We don't have that at all. We don't have that from any perspective. When you can have a country where you have a political party that almost has parity with the dominant party. Right now the Democrats are on top, which is, they're perceived as a little more liberal. But then you've got a Republican Party that wants to deny children, old people, and people who can't fend for themselves food. Or they want to stop the Affordable Care Act because they don't want a black man to get credit for doing something great for the country, but they have nothing else to offer. Their alternative is, well, if you get sick, die quick. That's compliments of Alan Grayson, Congressman of Florida. But so that's, I mean, when you write a big story, those are all the things that are going through my head when I'm writing a big story. How are we going to construct this community? What are these people going to be like? So those are the things that I think about. Those are the things that, as this singular endeavor and I sit home alone, those are the things that consume me when I want to think about writing a story.
All right. This is the November 8th, 2013 edition of the Genesis Black Science Fiction Society radio show. We are here with William Hayashi, SCIFI novelist, again discussing his new book, Conception talking also about his discovery and the overall arc of the dark universe. We are now, I guess, into the second hour of the show, and I know I want to just quickly, get us opened up here to questions, but I wanted to raise one more issue before we move on. And this is something that you and I have discussed privately, and maybe, I don't know, probably at one point, but privately discussed. And that was the fact that when I read this, the thing that really struck me about conception was what the blowback was going to be within the Black intelligentsia, within the African American community, because for so long, all our lives, we have been taught that the way in the light is diversity, integration, and this thing, this creation of the colony, as you call it, the conception, is basically like throwing this back in the face of all the people who work for the rights movement. That this thing that you were looking for, this integration, this melting pot, it's not working, or at least it's not working for us. And that's the story, I think, that, and just from my perspective, that your unique perspective as a person who is both African American and Japanese in heritage, that I think you had a little bit more distance and could step back a little more, probably than others of us could, because I think that we're so invested in the concept of integration that even to say something like this is almost, politically, socially blasphemy. So, do you have any commentary or response with regard to that?
I do. All right, I will tell people, I don't think that people of color in this country are ever going to have political or economic parity with the dominant culture. It's just not going to happen. All right. If it was going to happen, it would have happened just before Reagan came around. And it didn't. We didn't have enough time. Okay? We didn't have enough time. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think it's going to happen. Remember all those TV shows? I can't remember. You had one in every single show, Sanford and Son, whatever. You had the one radical, the old black radical who sat around going, screw whitey. Why do we want to integrate? And there's a lot of that in me. I admit it. And I used to feel bad about it, but I don't, because look at this country. This country is like a sociological cesspool, okay? I just don't see it. And here's the reason why we will never be able to assimilate. I say that as a black man and as someone who's Japanese. Obviously I'm a hybrid, but we can't assimilate. And you know why we can't assimilate? Because we're always going to look different. Okay, look at the standards of beauty. Look at the standards of attraction. Look at how you get followed around in that store, Barney's. Look at how things are at Lord & Taylor. Look. Everywhere you look, okay, the reason why we have trouble is because we don't look like them. Well, how do you overcome that? I don't think it can happen. I just don't believe it can happen. And that's a pretty radical thing for somebody like me to say, because I'll be honest with you. Having a Japanese last name, man, I get a pass on a lot of stuff, okay? A lot of stuff that straight up black folks, if you want to call them that, whatever you want to characterize it as, they have to put up with. I am fortunate enough in some ways to get a pass because I'm different. When you have a Japanegro like me, that's my little joke, how do you stereotype that? oh, well, he's the perfect DJ because he could handle the electronics and he's got rhythm. I mean, that's about the worst thing people can say about that. What else can they say? And the reason is they have no purchase for racism. So I do get a pass on that. And I know that. And I'll be honest with you, I use that, you know. I get different treatment, and not just because I was a DJ or anything like that. But this is sad. This is just wrong. This is not the way it's supposed to be. And yet, we found out as soon as Barack Obama got elected that we have come nowhere. Okay, nowhere. We still got this AstroTurf movement called the Tea Party, and they're running around with signs with a bone through Barack Obama's nose. Things don't change. They're glacial. The only way things change, and this was a thesis I wrote. The only way things change is when you punish people for doing wrong, and we're not punishing anybody for doing wrong. We're not. We don't care, and the people who care have no power. How stupid do you have to be a black person and vote for a Republican? How stupid. Now, I'm going to get some crap for that. But you know what? Think about it. What have they done for us since Lincoln? Okay, so yeah, that's where the anger comes out. That's where all of that comes out. I don't think we can assimilate. I just don't see it. So all y'all who think that someday, we're all going to be singing together and everybody, color's not going to make a difference, good luck with that. I just don't think it's going to happen. That's sad. I mean, that saddens me. But I'm just being honest. Normally I'm not this honest. But you know what? What the hell? None of y'all live near me. So I mean, that's how I feel about it, okay? People can say whatever they want, okay? But I'll tell you right now, if my name was Lionel Washington, my life would be a lot different, okay? If I didn't learn to speak the way I'm speaking now, instead of sounding like J.J. Walker the way I grew up, life would be a lot more different for me, And that's the sadness of the whole thing. I joke around. Well, I made sure that I had at least one Japanese parent so that I could kind of skate on some things through life. But you know what? It's sad but true. I got lucky. I won a lottery. Okay, all right, and it's not helping me in terms of I'm making more book sales. No, that's not happening. It's not helping me in terms of I got a better job than somebody else. That's not happening. I may have some better opportunities for employment, things like that, because people won't stereotype me. But the truth of the matter is, things in this country stink. Okay, they just do, and all cultures, When we came back from World War II, the worst off of us, the worst off people here were the European immigrants, okay? Germans, Czechoslovaks, French, whatever, Italians. They came over here. Well, look, they've assimilated. You can't tell them apart. Can't tell them from each other now. We're never going to have that opportunity. I'll be able to tell, who's African American, who's black, who's from the islands, just by looking at them. And as long as that visual dichotomy exists, I honestly don't think things are going to be any better. I just think people are too small. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think, like you said, the issue is marginalization. As long as you have the marginalization of the other, and that people of color will always be other. I mean, even one of my friends argued at one point. You go some places and you are quote unquote exotic, but even that makes you other. That you are an oddity, a rarity. Not necessarily some. Like I used to say, the talking dog. That everybody's very interested in looking at you, but nobody's really listening to what you say. Oh my God, you're a talking dog. That is really so interesting. But nobody listens to what a talking dog says. Just the fact that the dog can talk is very interesting. And I mean, I don't want to bring it down to something quite so base, but I think that's one of the issues that we kind of knock in our heads against some of the issues I think that you are discussing. right now, that issue of marginalization, that we don't, I guess everyone would hope that we would get to the point that we can get beyond it. But I think that in fact, one of the genius issues in the book is that it really does confront this thing that, generally many of us, as African Americans, Blacks, have all our lives, held up as this grand ideal, the concept of integration, even though, Brown versus Board of Education, that was not the goal of the parents in Brown. Their goal was not to integrate the school. Their goal was to get the same resources that Anglo students had at their school, not necessarily have our children going to school with their children. And unfortunately, I think one of the issues was when the Supreme Court actually, ruled on the issue, they kind of, in order to get the ruling the way that they wanted to get it, they had to prevail on whites in their superiority by saying, these poor little Negroes, they feel so bad about themselves, and as a society, we've got to basically let them see that they are secondary citizens and that they can be just like us. And, I don't think that at any point, any of us who, see ourselves as academics who had, an illustrious academic career, I don't think that I got any smarter, any faster by, sitting next to an Anglo child. I was who I was when I got there. And, I absorb what I absorb because I'm who I am, not because of who I'm sitting by. The only thing that made a difference was that what I guess the courts realized is that these Anglo parents, if they had to put the money to their children's education, we would just be kind of like the trickle down, that we would just be there to receive whatever the runoff was, as they gave their children the best education that they could. And of course, now we see with charter schools and vouchers and things of that, now they're tearing down the public school system that for a long time served, so many of us, really well. And but I really thought that this thing, I think it's rather revolutionary, at this juncture to just basically to express as people of color, as Black people, that we'll be better off on it. And so we're not supposed to say that. A lot of people, people talk and walk, and protest and died and get hosed, for this concept of, integration. And for us, at this juncture, as we're reading this, those of us who read it and say, oh my God, when is the ship coming for me? We're thumbing our nose at the, at struggle that, our parents and our grandparents fought, to get to the point where we are, wherever it is that we are, that we think we are right now.
Yeah, but that's the point. I mean, where are we? Where are we? We still get followed around in the store when we go in the shop. We still are redlined as far as the insurance that we have to pay because the neighborhood we live in. Where are we? Where is the benefit? See, there is no benefit because at every turn, as long as you could see that someone's darker than Harry Belafonte, you're going to be, you're always going to have somebody parceling out some inequity because of that difference. And that's one of the things that I wanted to address in writing the books. A Black academic, as a matter of fact, you're the one who introduced me to her. The first thing she said when she talked to me was, "Thank you for writing this book." And I said, well, why is that? She said, because what you did was you managed to describe the circumstance of being Black in America that very few people understand, very few people notice, very few people, very few white people see. And that is, when you boil it down, it comes down to that we have been trained to accept, half the credit for working twice as much. And what the hell kind of life is that we're leaving behind for our kids? That's not something that's good. That's not something that's laudable. That's not even something that we want. We would love to have, to be able to say, son, daughter, you're going to have a better life than I had because of this struggle. Well, that ain't happening. At least it I don't think it is. And maybe I'm a pessimist. Maybe I just, and I certainly hope no white people ever listen to this broadcast because I may lose some of my privilege for having this Japanese last name. But having said that, the story I conceived of was a story of America. It's just as much an American story as any classical American literature, something written by John Gardner or something like that. It is that story. It's the story of America. And it's not the America that any of us want. I mean, even the people who live in it and some of the people who benefit from it don't want it. Because when you have huge inequities in culture, it doesn't work out for anybody. So, I wanted to do this obviously it had to be speculative fiction because, black folks on the moon, well, what have you there? And I wanted to do it in a way where the ending is going to be palatable to everybody, but it's going to make people think. And I already know what the ending is going to be for this trilogy because it leads to the next trilogy. That 7th volume, I think, if I live long enough to complete it, is going to be a surprise to everybody. And I think that's also the essence of writing good science fiction, where you have someone who conceives of a story, they put it together, and it's a story that you think you know what the ending is. You go, oh, this is a familiar meme. I get this. I see this. And I'm just hoping it's a surprise, let me ask you, when you read Discovery and you read those last words, and obviously you're not going to say them, but when you read the final words of that story, how did you feel when you read them?
Of course, I laughed.
Exactly.
I laughed. I mean, I don't think you'd be a person of color, any person of color, who understands, anything and not laugh, especially after all, so much of some of what happens in Discovery. If you're a person of color and you read some of the stuff that happens in Discovery, it's like somebody, not nails on the chalkboard, but somebody trying to peel your skin back. Emotionally, that's what it's like. I mean, you've got to. When you get to the end, it is that kind of release. There is a catharsis when you get to the end.
Well, my intent was to write a great yarn and to write a big story, and that's at the heart of it. All the other issues, my personal issues, my desires, for what I wanted to accomplish and what I want people to read out of it. All of that aside, I still wanted to write a good story. I wanted to have a great arc so that when people read the first book, they go, "Ooh, this was worthy enough for me to look for the second book and maybe the third book." So ultimately, I am looking for, I guess I'm looking for validation for my storytelling. And that, I think that somebody asked, well, why do we still submit our work seeking validation? It's not just from them. I mean, obviously, when we want validation, we would love it to be universal, but we also know that we have the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com because, by and large, we don't have the ScienceFictionSociety.com where blacks, Latinos, Asians, where everybody participates kind of on an equal setting, and people are judged by the quality of their work. Unfortunately, we exist in a niche because it's not mainstream yet, and it looks like things are picking up. It looks like things, people are getting discovered. Black comics, black comic characters are are becoming more and more popular, and I think part of that is because it's the old 1920s, 30s, 40s. Musician has to go to Europe. Black musician has to go to Europe to get validation before he can be, quote, discovered, unquote, in America. And the other is just simple greed. You know, the dominant culture will laud anything they can make money off of. So if we're successful financially and we ply our art and it gets recognition and it gets financial recognition, things are going to change. You know, things will change. But, you know, be aware that within that change, you are probably just going to be the flavor of the month. Okay? You know, all of a sudden somebody goes, "Ooh, look at this comic. This is great. Look at these guys, blah, 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 blah." But then, you know, you've got, 10,000 other content creators who are nipping at your heels going, what is the formula that seemed to work? Can we replicate that formula and get the same kind of traction? And we know that model works because look at Hollywood. Hollywood hasn't had an original idea come out of it since what? Oh, Blair Witch Project. Blair Witch was just so different. It was just so different, and somebody did it without a studio. And so everybody went, oh, my God, look at this. And then, of course, they had this studio-fi, sorry for making up the word, that whole Blair Witch model for Cloverfield. And then all of a sudden we have, it's back to the big studio kind of thing. So we're pretty creative. The cool thing is that black urban culture pretty much rules the world. You know, rap is out there. You've got miniature Japanese girls, singing in Japan with those little high voices. I know that's stereotypical, but it is true. And they're rapping. They're rapping. So of course, our culture skews wide in terms of its acceptance and its popularity.
Well, which is why one of the terms you use me to the dominant culture. Actually, African American culture is the dominant culture in the world. Everything else
it is. It is.
It.
But the only reason why it's dominant is because white folks are making money off of it.
Yeah, they have the numbers.
Yeah.
Now look, it is now. We're down to the last half hour of the show. We were supposed to open up the floor to questions about half an hour ago. We kind of got a little bit beyond ourselves. So right now, if it is at all possible, it would be good to open up the floor so that everybody can jump in and ask their questions. I know we've kind of gone on for quite a while. We've tried to stay within the universe of the dark side universe and the books and the politics and the social issues that have birthed it. So, if you have any questions, I guess, for William regarding the book, the creation of the book, his background, whatever it is that he can elucidate for you, we welcome to do that at this time. Is there anybody?
Yeah, if anybody dials in, there's nobody on the line really, but I've been kind of looking at the chat room, and if anybody has any questions that they have of me specifically, I would be more than happy to answer them. Feel free to dial in. Somebody mentions, yes, that the game is played by their rules. That is true. Their rules are, kind of rule the game because they have the money, they have the power. The few very, very wealthy, black entertainers we have, they're pretty much, staking out their own turf and trying to protect their turf, protect their creativity because things do get taken away. People do, what was that Korean guy who had that big video? Psy, yeah. Okay, so you've got a guy like that who comes out of South Korea. All of a sudden, he's got a hit video on YouTube, and he made like $4 million off of that. So think about that, guys. If you can get a video to go wide, there's some money in that. And so what's the pinnacle of his achievement is when he was on the awards show, and he gets to do his song with MC Hammer. Well, we had to validate him creatively, in order for him to well, actually, we gave him a boost up. Somebody's mentioning here that what I'm referring to as fringe, that's where all the dope stuff that truly changes humanity happens. That's true. Some of that does change humanity in a lot of ways. But the problem with that is once that fringe stuff is discovered, then it becomes mainstream, and then it's bought. Then it's bought. Then it's taken away. Then it's controlled. Chris Rock has a great line. Chris Rock says that the difference between wealth, being rich, and being wealthy is Shaq is rich. The man who signs his check is wealthy, and that's something that we don't seemingly care about, because as soon as something of ours develops value, financial value, someone else comes along to take it away or control it.
Right.
And that's the thing that we have to somehow figure out, how to retain control over not only our creativity, but control over our inventions, our own inventions. And that's a tough one.
Yeah, but isn't that the seminal issue in conception?
Well, absolutely. What they did was they not only did they create their own ball, which was a better ball than anybody's ball, but they went and they took it home, and they took it home to a place where white folks couldn't follow them. So, and I really think that, we'll see how this whole thing plays out. We'll see if I start getting traction. I was very lucky. A friend of a friend referred me to John Jackman, who is the artist for the Walking Dead TV show. Great guy, did a great cover for Conception. And, there are people who judge a book by its cover. People have looked at it. I just went and looked at a little bit of some sales. Already Conception sold a few copies from people who don't know me. So we'll see what kind of traction it gets, and we'll see if the Dark Side universe gets any traction in mainstream literature. It may not. It may never. People may get pissed at me. And if they get pissed at me, well, overcoming a blackball, excuse the term, is not an easy thing to do. So, again, I didn't write these to get wealthy, to get rich, to get paid. But I wrote them because I really thought I had something to say.
Right. And I think that's one of the, one of the more important issues. And again, this is something that we have discussed. And the issue of point of view is an issue of perspective. And I think that a lot of people, and I know there's some conversations, things we were saying, we're getting deep, purple here, but we have to start thinking about the why, of what we do. And sometimes, when I thought about this, when I read it, and I was going through my mind is clicking through this thing and realizing what we're saying is this, oh my gosh, there's segregationists or something of that ilk. But those are words that we have been made afraid to say, because the underpinning of it is something that we have always been taught we could never believe, which was on our own we're better. And that's the thing. And it was I know growing up, you hear all the time when somebody would say something like that, we were supposed to be integrationists. Oh no, we're all better for everyone being, all together in diversity. But at some point when it's not working for you, when is it that you have the right to say, okay, maybe we could do a little bit better on our own, or maybe we could do a little bit better, at this juncture, with our children, in boarding schools, where we kind of prepare them for the world before we let the world, get its hands on them. And I think that's the thing. I think a lot of us are kind of afraid to say those things. Almost, I mean, it's going to cross over a little bit into, the issue of religion. A lot of people are so, afraid to question anything. I got to question anything. And God is going to get mad at punish me if I question, this issues of integration. Then, the liberal, white elite are going to get mad at me, and and they're going to withhold their largesse, from us. And I think we have got to stop being afraid of having thoughts, and we've got to think these things through. And I think that's what this book does. It kind of puts us in a position, these two books, where we have to start thinking things through and not being afraid of thinking the thoughts that may not be, good and happy thoughts or inclusive thoughts, and try to figure out, why this is not working. Why do we feel this way? Why, when we read conception, and specifically conception, discovery, certainly, but why, when we read conception, do we feel halfway through the book like, God damn it, why didn't somebody come, ask me to get on the damn ship? I mean, believe me, that's the way you feel. So, I just, I put it out there.
Well, to answer that, for me, it's a simple issue. It's a simple issue. And then, of course, I can't remember my train of thought. As a matter of fact, the caboose is out of sight. Here's the thing. There have been various mechanisms historically that have pushed Black people into believing that they must assimilate, they must seek approval, they must this, they must that. Okay, there's a lot of that. If we want to talk about something in common culture, there is the notion that is ingrained in many, 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 of the women in our culture that they are incomplete without a man. Okay, and lesbians notwithstanding, but there are cultural memes that are designed to make us conform. Okay, and first you have to recognize what the meme is. Okay, I think probably through the 40s, 50s, maybe even through the 60s, the Black church was a very strong advocate, for whatever reason, about assimilating, about getting along, about when we talk about we shall overcome, it's like we shall overcome our own deficiencies, and then we'll be worthy of whites, being with whites, or whatever. But all of those memes are designed to make us aspire to something that is comfortable for everybody else. And I think that one of the disturbing things about the dark side universe is that these Black folks don't care. They want out. And I think in terms of getting a mainstream publisher, okay, that may never happen because of the content. It's been looked at. Discovery's been looked at. And they, maybe, and I make the joke that, well, they're not going to go ahead and commit and publish my work, under, with Tor's looked at it, HarperCollins has looked at it, and someone at Penguin looked at it. But, these are Black folks who repudiate needing white folks. They repudiate American culture. They repudiate Earth. They repudiate America. So is that going to be a good meme? Is that going to be a financially successful meme? Is that going to be something that I will eventually see, a reasonable publishing contract for? I don't know. I really don't know. My feeling is I'm not going to get a publisher until the third book is out, if I get one at all. And the reason why is because, well, we got advanced Black folks. We got them hanging out, in outer space. They got stuff that Earth doesn't have. Is that crazy Japanegro William Hayashi going to have these people in outer space come back to Earth and kill all the white people in America? And, of course, you have to admit that would be a bad investment for HarperCollins. Okay? So you go through all of that and you wonder, well, what's it all about? And obviously, we still have to publish. We still have to tell our stories. We still have to have people, have characters in our works that are characters that our children will recognize as us. One of the coolest parts about Barack Obama being president of the United States is there are kids now. He's been president for 6 years, whatever. And there are kids who are growing up now who have not, they haven't lived through or haven't had, been mature enough or old enough to have note of the fact that we have not, this is our first black president. This is the only president they know. Well, how cool is that? That's still pretty cool. All right? Mm-hmm. And we have to, as content creators, I think that we should at least bear the responsibility of thinking about the work we do and how it may affect, our peers' children, and things like that. So that's kind of something that I is always in the back of my mind. Unfortunately, I did put a really great sex scene in Discovery, so it might not get into as many elementary schools as I'd like it to get into, but at least high schoolers can read it. So, I think about that too. Are we providing, creative universes that feed our kids? And, can they get interested in it and think about creating their own worlds because they've actually read something about themselves that they wouldn't get otherwise? So that's something I think about as well.
And in the chat room, we had, a little flurry of commentary. One of the things that has been listed, and I don't know who guest 16 is, but is listing one of the best dissections of how the education system is used to oppress us. This book is a must-read, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, and it's www.amazon.com, Pedagogy Oppressed 30th Anniversary. I don't know if the whole thing, the whole link came out, but Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I guess, is something that is being characterized as a must-read when dealing with the issues of education used to oppress. So thank you, 16. I think, like I said, right now we're down, actually below the last 15 minutes in the show. So.
Wait. We have to give a shout-out to the African continent. Of course, stupid white people call it a country, but it is a continent. There are many countries in it.
Yes.
Somebody's listening from Africa, so a shout out to them. Thank you for joining us. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Normally when I host the show, and this is purely, this is the truth. I appreciate the opportunity to do that because I've gotten to meet some pretty great people I wouldn't have met otherwise had I not found this site. BlackScienceFiction.com was, someone in a writers group that I was in Chicago found that, turned me on to the site. He said, you should check this place out. And there are so many creatives here. And you sit there and you read their stuff and you look at what they do. You look at the things that they've managed to accomplish. And in some ways, sometimes I just sit there and go, it's a damn shame this hasn't gotten wider distribution. I think that, I interviewed Yatasha Womack, and she just wrote a book on Afrofuturism. And to be very honest with everybody, I think that we're on the leading edge, the very leading edge of a huge explosion in Afrofuturism, in people discovering and lauding black science fiction, horror, fantasy, the entire creative black genre. And I think that we're just on the verge of seeing something happen, a shift in the paradigm. And it'll be interesting to watch over the next few years, even as short as 5 years from now, to see what's going to happen. We have a lot of black-themed conferences now. We have the all the cons. There are a lot of things that are just now starting to take off. And one of the things that I am watching is I'm watching the slow penetration into the dominant culture of black-themed, well, it's not just science fiction, but horror, fantasy, more and more of the art. So this is a really exciting time for all of this to happen, because I really think that things are going to take off. And I'm not talking about my stuff. That's the least of it at this point. But to watch a wave crashing over or a wave start to pick up steam is very exciting. So, I would caution everybody to think about that, because in the long haul, there's a lot of cool things that can happen with us, for us, and by us. So I got hopes in that way. I don't think we're going to ever assimilate, because visually we're different. And Americans are petty. Americans have been scared. American culture has turned almost everybody, dreadfully frightened about what may happen. Oh, I may lose my job. I may do this. Oh, I better get out of this union, otherwise I'm going to lose my job. And so when you have frightened people, you don't have very enlightened people. But the creative mind can do a lot of things. I mean, look at the Harry Potter phenomenon. Look at what you can do with literature if it catches on. And like they were talking about with this whole Afrofuturism, I think that our time may be coming. I'm not sure what other people think, but that's my belief.
And I think one of the important things that we have the opportunity, to do now is with, social media, with the internet, being able to connect with people of color, especially, people from African nations that we were never able to do before. I mean, I have met, in different contexts, people from Africa who are very, very interesting, discussing works, literature, theologies, mythologies. It's been really kind of interesting, some of these things that we are so separate from, but, bits and pieces, of cultures that we have here as African Americans, little bits and pieces that you see are, carryovers, from, some African cultures. So I think it's, really neat. And we need to have more discussion. And I think this has been such an opportunity, for us, to get to the point, especially through, science fiction, horror, speculative fiction, because, it gives us the freedom of writing, in a way that is, analogous and allegorical, where we can kind of step back and, I guess from a safe distance and put an idea out there and kind of let it germinate and see where it goes. And I just think this is, again, as you were saying, it's a very heady time for us. I mean, we'll look back, and this will be, the next, Harlem Renaissance, whatever we want to call it. But, looking back on these times is something that's very important in our development, as creatives, and not just the United States. I think, people of color, Black people all over the world, to, exploiting our differences as well as things about us that are the same. And I see it, I know you see it, and I know, many people, who are joining in, like Science Fiction Society and other groups, on the internet, deal with writing, color, that we see it. And I think it's going to be really a very interesting time.
Yeah, and you know what? I know that certain things are going to change for me. There will be opportunities where I will go and be able to, I will be asked to come and talk about, the reasoning behind the dark side universe, and what it, in the larger cultural context, what does it mean? And I know this about myself. I know if I ever show up someplace like that, and they start clapping and hooting and hollering and you know, all of that, I mean, it's going to make me cry. And the reason why is because to be appreciated for putting together a meme or coming up with an idea that moves people, I mean, that's the ultimate validation of my art, of my effort. And that's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be a big damn deal, because you know what? I don't take this for granted. When, you know, here in Chicago, we got some stupid people, and everyone I ran into who was writing a book or doing some writing, oh yeah, I'm going to write a book, and then I'm going to get Oprah to put me on her show, and then I'm going to be jumping off. And I'm thinking, well, if that's why you're writing, that seems like a pretty shallow way of doing it. You know, I understand people wanting to accumulate wealth, but anyhow, so if I get traction, if people decide that what I've written has value, and that it brings something to the table, a new way of looking at things, or at least a different way of looking at things, that's pretty cool. And in a lot of ways, that will be enough in terms of validation, and enough in terms of being appreciated for having created something. And you know, what more can you ask for, you know, than people who appreciate what you've done? And I will be very happy when that happens. You know, if that should happen, that's going to be pretty special. I don't take it for granted. I don't take my readers for granted. Anybody who you know, buys and reads any of my books, if you get in touch with me, I try to send out something in the mail to thank you for supporting my art, for supporting my endeavor. So, you know, if you do pick up Discovery, you do pick up Conception, please let me know, because, you know, it's the least I can do to send you a little thank you for doing so. I know we're coming up on the end of the evening.
Yeah, we are. We're coming up down within the last 5 minutes of the show. And I don't know whether Jarvis wanted to say.
Oh, he will in a minute.
I mean, he needs to do in less than a minute, because we are actually down the last few minutes of the show. So hopefully he will be around to say something, maybe give us who's our next guest on the show or something of that else. But if you are so inclined, to step in at this moment, that would be good.
You know, I noticed in the chat room someone mentioned about Neil deGrasse Tyson calling it the bleeding. I actually sent him. I had a brief flurry of messages, email kind of discussion with him back and forth, and he's the person who turned me on to the Black NASA little short movie on YouTube. If you can look up Black NASA, it's hilarious. I may have even posted it someplace on BSFS. If these ideas do get traction, these are the new ideas of our culture, that would be great. And like I said, to be counted in that, you know, if somebody ever says, you know, some of those great black science fiction writers, Octavia Butler, Samuel Delaney, William Hayashi, and that's going to be, I mean, that's a pretty cool thing. If that happens, I tell you, I might be a little bit insufferable for a little while.
Well, I'm hoping, I just saw Jarvis mark something, write something up, so I'm hoping you're listening. And we're asking if there's anything you wanted to say before we kind of bring
Oh, he's here. Go ahead and take us home.
Anything? Hello?
I'm in the book. Just the usual, you know, I'm just in the cut listening. But the thanks for everybody. Man, it's amazing to have this go on for so long and to have buy-in and participation from everyone. We're going to be coming up on our 1-year anniversary of our first successful show next weekend. So make sure to tune in for that. But also, back to the present, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to thank William for coming on. And I want to thank Penn for coming in and doing a great job, as always, of doing the interview portion. I'm just completely thankful. I have to keep saying that for everybody that participates. But I'm really trying to do something innovative and needed for the Black science fiction community, and you guys are helping make that happen. It's not about Jarvis Sheffield or administrators. It's about all the members of Black Science Fiction Society. So once again, thank you.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the November 8th, 2013 edition of the Black Science Fiction Society radio show, the Genesis Black Science Fiction Society radio show. Again, we thank William Hayashi for being here this evening as our guest. Please look for his books. TheDarkSideTrilogy.com is the website. You can find the books, of course, on Amazon. Definitely, you'll find it at BSFS, along with the rest of the creators that you go see on here talking and chatting it up in the chat room. And we thank everybody for showing up this evening. I'm Penelope Flynn, and I'm hoping that we will be seeing you, hearing from you all again next week. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye. 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 Bye.